What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. And today in this video, as you can see by the title, we are installing ball joints on Project Raptor. Now, this installation process will be for all 2007 through 2018 Jeep JK and JKUs. It does not matter if it's a Rubicon, a Sport, an Islander. It does not matter whatsoever. Now, let's go ahead and get into the parts that you will need for this installation. All right, guys, so the first thing that you guys will need, and I think the most important, is some jack stands. I'm just going to be using one in this scenario, and a car jack, and then an assortment of various tools. Now, everything that you guys see here in front of me, a lot of it is what you will need. Some of it you might not need. So let's just go through it from left to right. Right there, I've got my Duralast wrenches there. Those are really helpful. I'll go ahead and open them up for you. This, for example, is a 10 and 11, but they're ratcheting and they swivel. Very helpful to have. I got this set off of Amazon. DuraTech, not Duralast. So those are, you don't really need those. Those will just help get the job done faster. You need a caliper hanger or a bungee cord. I got some snips right there, the orange ones, and some wrenches or pliers there. I've got a 1/2 inch torque wrench, a 1/4 inch torque wrench. In the back there is my ball joint press, which is right here, and the one in the front is the ball joint press accessories. You will need both of them, and we'll get to that later in the video. I'll show you guys everything on the inside of those, but I will link those in the description box below. Alongside these, I got all of those from Amazon, pretty cheap, and they work really good. To operate the ball joint press, you will either need a socket wrench or an impact. I recommend using an impact. It is a lot faster to use. I've got my Milwaukee M18 1/2 inch and my Milwaukee M18 3/8 inch. I've got a hammer. I've got some anti-seize and some grease. You can get these both at an O'Reilly's or just your local auto parts store. I've got a magnetic tray to hold all of our bolts. I've got various sockets here. I've got my spline key for my lug nuts. I've got a 21 deep well, a 22 deep well, 1/2 inch extension, 21 millimeter short well. I've got a 9/32 1/4 inch deep well. Now that you might not need that one. I've got a 13 millimeter 12-point 1/2 inch socket, and I've got a 3/8 inch short well 7/8 inch socket. Also got a 24 millimeter socket and a 1 1/8 inch socket. Also, I've got my ball joints from TRQ. I recommend buying cheap ball joints so you don't have to spend $200-300 on ball joints every time you have to replace them. Guys, so I know that was a lot of information about all the tools that you will need, but the next clip I will show you guys everything you will need just in a list, so you guys can pause it, screenshot it, and have it so you guys can collect it all at the same time. Now, the ball joints, I just want to say one thing before we get into replacing these things is don't buy expensive ball joints. There's no point. I have currently on here, I've got the TerraFlex ball joints, and I think they're the heavy duty rebuildable ones. And they lasted me, these ball joints lasted me maybe a year to 2 years, because, you know, I wheel my Jeep. I take it off-road. So if you take your Jeep off-road, don't expect these ball joints to last very long. So that's why I bought ones from TRQ. Like I said in previous videos, TRQ is a brand that I trust. I've never had any issues out of, and they're really cheap ball joints. They're like, I don't know, $100 for all 4 of them. So I just recommend buying cheap ball joints so you don't have to spend an arm and a leg to replace them in the future. So let's go ahead and get into this installation. Now, the first thing that we need to do is jack up the vehicle. I'm only going to be jacking up the driver's side because yesterday I replaced the passenger side ball joints. Now, it's the same process if you're going to do the driver's side or the passenger side. It's the same exact process. So all I will be showing you guys today is the driver's side. So let's go ahead and jack up this side of the vehicle and then take this wheel off. All right guys, so we got the vehicle jacked up. The next thing we need to do is remove our wheel. Now I'm gonna be using my spline key here, and this fits in a 21mm socket. And I'm gonna go ahead and take all of my lug nuts off and set the wheel aside. All right guys, so the next thing that we're gonna do here is we're gonna remove our caliper and caliper bracket. So there's two ways you can do this. You can remove the caliper bracket and the caliper as one piece, which are going to be 2 bolts back here, one right there and one, as you can see, right down there where my finger is. They are 21mm. You can remove that and just hang the caliper up and out of the way on the shock or on the coil. It does not matter. Or for me, I'm just going to remove the caliper and then the caliper bracket. So to remove the caliper, you're going to remove these 2 13mm bolts. There's one right there and one right here. Let's go ahead and do that now. Once your caliper has been removed, you can hang it up and out of the way. Next thing you want to do is remove your brake pads, and then we can remove this bolt here and this bolt here, which are 21mm, which will inevitably remove your caliper bracket. All right, after the caliper bracket is removed, you can go ahead and take your rotor off. All right guys, so once your rotor is removed, you want to come back here to where your ABS line is and just disconnect it from all these little clips that is holding on to your brake hose here, right here behind the rotor, and all along, all the way up to behind the shock tower. And behind the shock tower, as you guys can see, that is where the ABS line is plugged into. So what you want to do is, if you see back there, there's 2 little plastic clips. You want to unclip those from the shock tower. Just stick a little screwdriver back there and unpop those, and then unplug your ABS line. And then we can move on to the next step. All right guys, so the next step that you want to come over here to your tie rod and remove this cotter pin from this castle nut. And then you want to remove the castle nut all the way to the top of the stud here. And then once the castle nut is onto the top of the stud, or aligned with the top of the stud, you can use a hammer and you can knock your tie rod out of the steering knuckle. And that's what we're gonna do now. All right guys, so once your tie rod is off of the steering knuckle, the next thing you wanna do is you wanna come back behind here and locate the 3 bolts, which are going to be one right here, one right here, and one right here. And those are a 13mm 12-point socket. I would drench these in some PB Blaster, liquid wrench, Freall, WD-40, whatever you got. Let it sit for a little bit and then come out and remove these 3 bolts. All right, once those 3 bolts are removed, the next thing you want to do is we can get back here on the axle shaft itself right here, and we can actually pry this backwards towards us, and the whole wheel bearing, backing plate, and axle shaft should come out. All right, so once you remove that whole assembly, set that aside. And our next step is to come underneath the top ball joint here. And you can see you can kind of see it a little bit here, on the nut holding on to the ball joint, there's a little cotter pin on here. We need to remove that cotter pin. And the same thing on the bottom one, there's also a cotter pin. Let's remove both of those cotter pins and we can move on to the next step. All right, so once your cotter pins are removed, the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna remove this castle nut here, which is on the top ball joint, and that's gonna be a 7/8 socket. You wanna go ahead and remove that, and when you remove this castle nut, this bracket will come off. We can go ahead and do that now. All right, once that top nut is completely off, the next thing we wanna do is remove the bottom one. And you can go ahead and crack this one loose and remove it about halfway and then leave it right where it's at. I'll show you guys once I'm done. As you guys can see, it is off of where it was before and it's still on there a little bit. And the reason why we want to do that is our next step is we're going to knock this knuckle loose, and we don't want it dropping on our toes, so we left that bolt on just a little bit. So you can hit it right here or right here, it does not really matter. I like to hit it right here with a hammer, so we can knock this loose of our ball joints. All right, as you guys can see, it has separated from our ball joints. And once we get that separated, the next thing we can do is just go ahead and remove this nut all the way. and that will remove our steering knuckle. The next thing we're gonna do is, if your ball joints has grease points, which you'll see here on the lower one and here on the top one, you wanna go ahead and remove those. And to do that, we're gonna be using our 1/4" socket, and the size is a 9/32. Let's go ahead and remove those. All right guys, so now it is ball joint time. So I apologize for my shadow right here, but this is just what we're gonna have to work with. So I know all of this looks kind of confusing, but don't worry, I'm gonna walk you guys through it. You don't need all of these pieces to do these ball joints. I'm gonna pull out the parts that you do need really quickly, and then we can go over it from there. All right guys, so the next thing we wanna do is, there's these boots on the bottom of these ball joints, one here, one here. Well, that one actually is gone, so we don't need that one actually. So on yours, there will be a boot on the bottom here, and on this one here, you wanna go ahead and remove these out of the way, and we can move on to our next step. All right, so the first ball joint that we're gonna be removing is the top one here. So once you've got that boot removed, and if you have the grease points on here, and you have those taken out, the first thing you want to grab is one of these rings here that fits over the top of your ball joint, but doesn't hang off the edge of your knuckle here. So it fits just over the top of that, right? That's the first piece you want to grab. The second piece you want to grab is a piece that looks like this. Yours is probably going to look a lot better than mine, but this piece here goes just right there on the top of that. All right. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to grab our actual ball joint press. And as you notice, one piece is smooth, or one end is smooth, and one end has got threads going through it. So let me show you how to set this part up. All right, so I propped this up here on my lower control arm to show you guys what I'm talking about. So you've got this part here. The threaded part goes up top, and the non-threaded part stays on the bottom. You want to thread this piece in here just enough. It doesn't matter right now, just that's where that goes. The next piece that you want to grab is a piece that looks like this. Got a lip on the end of it. Now, I found this piece on Amazon in this kit here. Like I said, this will be linked in the description box below. This piece did not come with the main ball joint kit. Some of them do, some of them don't. So this is the piece that we really, really need. So this piece here is gonna sit inside this lip here, just like that. And then we can grab this here. Let's see if I can show you. It will be hooked on like so. And then this piece on top will be tightened down to where it is nice and snug with that top piece. As you guys can see here, yes, it's a little crooked, don't mind that. That is the way it is supposed to be set up. Now, once you guys have got this set up just like this, you can take your impact, put a socket on your impact and put it on the end here. As you guys can see, I already did yesterday. And you can go ahead and tighten this down. And when you tighten this down, so when you turn this to the right, this piece here is going to compress upwards and push this ball joint out the top. Now, you can do this with a socket wrench and a socket, but it's going to take a lot longer, and you're going to require a lot of strength. So I recommend using a impact on it, and you can get this done a lot faster. And we'll be back when I have the top ball joint out. All right, guys, our top ball joint is completely out. Next, let me show you how to set up the bottom one, and we'll remove the bottom one. All right, guys, we're moving on to the bottom ball joint. And to remove that one, yes, you'll need your press again, and then you'll need two pieces. This piece is one you'll need. Now, this one is different than the other one that we used, which is right there. But this is the one you'll need. This is what it looks like. Now, there's this lip here on the bottom. This piece, you flip it over, and it fits nice and snug into this ring here. So, just slide that into place just like that. And then the same exact ring that you use for the top ball joint, goes right here, fits nice and snug right there. And that's the setup that you're going to use. This part here will be underneath here, and this part here will be pressing in right here. And we're going to be pushing this ball joint downwards. So I'll show you guys once I have it set up. All right, guys, so this is the way you want it set up. You can put this through the top one. It makes it line up a little bit easier. And then now we can go ahead and tighten this, and this will push this ball joint through the bottom. Let's go ahead and do that now. And guys, there you go. There is your bottom ball joint. Next, we're going to be reinstalling the new ball joint. All right, guys, so the next thing you want to do to prep for the new ball joints is just take some grease and put it on the inside here and there, and this will help the ball joints be pressed in a lot easier. All right, guys, so here are our new ball joints right here. So as you guys can see, there is a difference between the two, and that's okay. So usually the taller one here, or the bigger one here, is the top ball joint, and the smaller one here is the lower ball joint. Now, mine came with new cotter pins for both the lower and the upper, and if yours didn't, you will need to get some cotter pins to make sure these are thoroughly installed. And mine came with new nuts, and usually they do come with new nuts, castle nuts for the threads. Now we're going to be installing the lower ball joint first, and let me show you how to set that up. So the first thing you want to do for your lower ball joint is remove the boot that was on the bottom of it. As you can see right there, go ahead and remove that first. All right, so this is another piece that you guys will need. I don't know if that part number really matters, but this is what it looks like on the top, and the bottom is pretty hollowed out. You want to take this piece here and you want to set it right here, just on the top there. Then you want to take your piece here that we used before, just like this, and set it up on top of that one there. Now, this lower ball joint is going to be installed from the bottom here. We're going to be pressing it in through the bottom. And to do that, I'm going to show you. So if it goes like this when we're pressing it in, you want to take one of these couplings here, and whichever one fits around the bottom lip of our ball joint, that's the one we're going to want here. And then you're going to take this piece here. Obviously, this lip is going to go in the bottom lip there. So if I'm showing you guys upside down, this is the way you're going to want it set up, like this. I'm just going to show you, put this together here. And that's the way it's going to be set up here. I'll show you guys once I have it all assembled. So this is kind of loosely set up here, but this is the way you guys want to have that set up. Okay. And once you guys have that all tightened down, we can go ahead and turn this to the right and install this ball joint until this lip right here is seated with the bottom of this knuckle on the axle. All right, guys, so once you have this lower ball joint pressed in, you can go ahead and take your rubber boot that you pull off the bottom of it and reinstall it, and then we can go ahead and move on to the upper ball joint. All right, guys, so remove the boot from the top ball joint, and you can go ahead and just set that in place. And the parts that you're going to need to install this one, you're going to need this one here again, and this one just goes right over the top of that. You're going to need this piece here for the press, which just sits right up on top of that one as well. And then another piece you're going to need is this one here. It's tapered a little bit, and this piece just sits inside the press like so, and this goes underneath your ball joint here. So I'll show you guys what it looks like when it's all set up. All right, guys, so that's what it will look like once it's all together pretty much. And then we can go ahead and tighten this down and install this upper ball joint. All right, guys, so this is what it should look like once you get your upper ball joint installed. And now you can go ahead and take your rubber boot that you took off before and then reinstall that just like so. Make sure that's nice and seated. And now we can go ahead and reinstall all of our other parts. And we're going to start with the steering knuckle. Next thing you want to do is you want to take your knuckle and put it over your new ball joints and put that bottom nut back onto your ball joint, and I'll show you guys what to do from there. All right, so we got the knuckle back on there, and I just got my nut loosely fitted onto there. So I had to reuse my old nut because the new nut, I don't have the right socket size for it. I don't know what size it is. So if you guys are using the TRQ ball joints and you guys are using this nut that came with it, tell me what size socket this is. If not, it's okay. So we're reusing the old one, which is totally fine. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to gun this one down, or tighten this one down with a torque wrench at first, and then we're going to gun it down with a impact and seat this steering knuckle, and I'll show you what it looks like when we're done. All right, so once you got that bottom castle nut tightened up as much as you can go ahead and put this bracket back on, and you can put the other castle nut on as well and tighten this one up as much as you can get it tight. Once this one is tight, you can go ahead and tighten the bottom one up as well, because once you tighten the top one, the bottom one will come loose again. So just make sure, I know that was a lot of information, tighten this one up first, and then you can retighten this one. All right, so once those bolts are tightened down on your upper and your lower ball joint, your next step is you can grab your torque wrench and torque down those bolts to 75 to 85 foot-pounds. So once that is done, our next step is we're going to be putting the wheel bearing, the axle, and your dust cover back together. All right, guys, so I just put mine in there just a little bit so I can show you guys what I'm talking about. So when you're reinstalling your axle shaft and you're putting it inside the axle housing, you want to put like a flathead screwdriver right here where my finger is and hold the screwdriver when you're sliding in your axle shaft, so that way your axle shaft does not touch your axle housing down here, because we don't want to get any dirt or mud or rust inside that axle housing where your ring and pinion gears are, because that would be not very good. So you can go ahead and push this in, just keep pushing it in, and you'll feel, once you feel this hit something, you can kind of turn this a little bit. I'm not going to be able to do this one-handed, but you can kind of turn this a little bit, turn your wheel bearing. Try this again. Turn this and feel the axle shaft go up into the gears. It will slide into the ring and pinion gears inside your pumpkin there. Now I'll show you guys what that looks like once it's done and installed. So once your axle shaft is installed, you can see that it is up in there. All right, so once you've got everything pretty much lined up, next thing you're gonna do is gonna grab your bolts. They're gonna be these three here, and we're going to be reinstalling these into our wheel bearing. Now, before you do that, something that you might want to do is just take a look at your threads, and if they've got a lot of buildup in between them, you can take a little wire wheel or wire brush and just clean up those threads. And then before you put these back in and install them, I recommend that you put some anti-seize on them. Thread lubricant, you can get this at your local O'Reilly's. Put a little bit of this on the threads and up and down your bolts, and then we can go ahead and reinstall these. All right, after you get those bolts reinstalled, next thing we do is take your ABS line and connect it back all the way up, run it all the way back up and connect it back up to your connector. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our tie rod and bolt it back up to right here. All I'm going to do is I'm going to stick this end through here and put the nut on it, and I'll show you guys how to tighten it down. All right, so once you've got this bolt onto here, you can tighten this, go ahead and tighten the castle nut down as much as you can until your thread or your stud is going to start spinning. And once that starts spinning, you're going to want to put some vice grips onto the stud and then tighten this castle nut back down at the same time as you're holding the stud still. And we're going to go ahead and do that now. All right, guys, so as you can see, I've gotten that castle nut tightened down all the way around the stud, and our tie rod is completely back installed. Now, I will say that this doesn't apply to all tie rods. It really just depends on your tie rod setup. Not all tie rods do this. You don't have to hold the stud and tighten the castle nut down or the nut down on all tie rods. It just depends on what tie rod you have. Now, the next step we're going to do is reassemble our brake system. We're going to grab our rotor and slide it back over the wheel bearing. All right, once our rotor is on, it's not going to stay on all the way, but that's okay. We're going to reinstall our caliper bracket, and that is with these two large bolts here, as you guys can see. And these, remember, these are 21 millimeters. So let's go ahead and reinstall our caliper bracket. All right, once you got your caliper bracket installed, the next thing you're gonna do is reinstall your brake pads. All right, once your brake pads are installed, the next thing you wanna do is grab your caliper and reinstall it onto your caliper bracket. So once the caliper is installed onto the caliper bracket, the next thing we're gonna do is put our wheel back on and tighten our lug nuts down. And there you have it, guys. That is the complete installation of ball joints on your Jeep Wrangler. Now, I only showed the driver's side on camera because I did the passenger side yesterday, and it's the exact same procedure for both sides. Now, with that being said, if you guys enjoyed the video, or if I helped you out in any way, shape, or form, make sure to give me a like, comment down below. What is your favorite brand of replacement parts to use for your Jeep? Mine is TRQ. I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts in the comments down below, and subscribe for more videos like this. We'll see you guys in the next one.